The first two Paranormal films are not good, but I decided to watch the third one, and if I didn't like this one, I wouldn't go any further. Am I going to watch the next one? No, I'm not. Paranormal Activity 3 was released in 2011. It's directed by Joost and Ariel Schulman, and we have a cast including Chris Smith, Lauren Bittner, Chloe Csengery, Katie Featherston, Jessica Taylor-Brown, Sprague Grayden, and various others. And praise where it's due. In fact, there are a couple of things I can praise. The performances are very good. That's definitely worth praising. And I do think the world building is getting better. I think they made a real effort here to create a story that's quite decent. And I think the narrative, it wasn't interesting, but on paper it's a good idea. So I think they took the right direction. This is a prequel. We actually go back to when Katie and Kristi were young children. We have Chloe Csengery and Jessica Taylor-Brown as young Katie and young Kristi. And obviously we have this demonic character, and there's this aspect of it being an imaginary friend, and I quite like that. I thought that was a really good idea, and the world building is quite good. And I'm not going to go back and watch the previous two films because I've already seen the first one twice, and once was too many times. But if I were to go back and watch them, it would be interesting to then think of that world building that the third film has helped enhance. So again, credit where it's due. The narratives are starting to get a little bit better. The narrative structures are getting a lot better, but it's still not a horror film. Still nothing happens for the entirety of the film. And the concept is the same, of course. We're looking at the house, and sometimes during the day, sometimes during the night, and in theory, spooky things begin to happen. This one had a lot more potential. As I said, the narrative is a lot stronger, even though it's not very well executed, but the concept is a lot stronger. And they could have really lent into that imaginary friend aspect more. They could have done a lot more with that without losing the concept of us watching this primarily through home videos. These are videos that were recorded back in the day because, as I said, it is a prequel. And I think they could have done a lot more with that without losing the essence of looking at it through camera footage. So definitely did not meet its potential, but for the first time I actually saw potential, unlike the previous two films. But I finally figured out why it's not scary, other than the fact that it's just not scary. But I finally was able to work out why these three films aren't scary, and there are two reasons for that. The first one is that the threat just doesn't seem like it's there. And partly that's because, well, it's connecting to the second point that I'm going to make, but the threat just doesn't seem present. I don't feel like the threat is in the room with the characters. And that connects to the second point. Where are we supposed to be looking? There are so many times when we're looking at the screen and nothing happens, but it's also not clear where we're meant to be looking. For example, we're looking at the entire room. The camera is up high on the wall and we're looking across the whole room. And it's just a case of, it's like Where's Waldo, trying to just find the scary thing that's meant to be happening. And it never happens. Or maybe it's happening and it's so tiny that we're missing it. So not only does it feel like the horror aspect is not in the room with the characters, even if it is in the room, and sometimes, yes, obviously we can't see what's happening, it's so far away, or it's so difficult to see. There is so much distance between us as viewers and the horror element. If something technically scary is happening in the corner of the screen, far off into the distance of the room, we're so far away from that it's not scary. Now, I'm not saying everything has to be up in our faces right in front of the camera to be scary, but not only is there often just nothing happening on screen, but when it does happen, or when we're able to identify where the supposed horror aspect is happening, it's so far away in the distance that it doesn't feel like we're involved in the narrative. And obviously, horror works when you feel immersed in the story, when you can feel the presence of that horror aspect, whether it's a demonic presence or a vengeful spirit or whatever it is, a serial killer, whatever. If you don't feel like they're even in the room and you can barely see this, what's the point? So again, that's why it feels like, and I've mentioned this before, it feels like it's written for people who don't like horror films. Because when something potentially scary does happen, it's teeny, it's tiny, it's difficult to see, it's far off in the distance when we're right where the camera is. It doesn't work. And I finally was able to identify why. with the previous two films, it was just a case of they're not scary. But with this one, I was finally able to put my finger on exactly why that is. Am I saying it would be scarier if the horror elements happened right at the forefront, right in front of the screen? Probably not, but I think they could have lent into maybe jump scares a bit more. It would have been easier to feel like we were there rather than looking through a screen, because it does feel like we're looking through a screen. And there are many, many camera-based horrors, whether it's found footage or we're looking through somebody's camera phone or whatever, or a webcam. I love webcam horror. Even though we're looking through a camera, they're very, very scary because they're done very well. And unfortunately, it doesn't work here for multiple reasons. So at least I was finally able to identify exactly why it's not scary. That's a little bit more helpful than just saying, well, it wasn't scary. So I'm pleased with that, but unfortunately not pleased with the film. As I said, I'm not going to watch Paranormal Activity 4. I don't even know if there is a fourth one. There is another one. I don't know if it's called Paranormal Activity 4 or if it's got a different title. Some of the later ones don't have a number in the title. In fact, I'll check so I can provide some useful information. Yes, it's the last one with a number. We have Paranormal Activity 4, and then we have the marked ones, the Ghost Dimension, and Next of Kin. I don't know why they stopped numbering them. I don't know if we have a complete change of cast and crew, if they're not connected, if we have different characters. I don't know. Right now, I don't care. If somebody were to tell me, actually, the latest ones are really scary, maybe I'll kind of think about watching them. Maybe one day I'll watch Paranormal Activity 4. Maybe my curiosity will get the better of me and I'll watch them in a month or two's time. But at least for right now, I need a break. Paranormal Activity 3 is not a good film. I've at least been able to identify why it doesn't work. And unfortunately, at the moment, I won't be watching the next one.